Well, Jack, thank you for speaking with Business Insider. Would love to start by hearing some of your comments on Sam Bankman-Fried. He just said that Bitcoin can never be accepted as a payment system. You're kind of, building a product that's the antithesis of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what he said.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think, unfortunately, everything Sam said was arguably factually incorrect. Everything from the speed in which Bitcoin transmits value all the way to its use of proof of work and the viability of something like proof of stake, which doesn't make any relative sense whatsoever. Just to be clear, I think this is a very important point to make. Bitcoin in its original form at the base layer is not optimizing for speed and payments. Bitcoin is trying to allow a digital instrument accessible to everyone in the world to exist forever in a distributed, trustless manner. Bitcoin is trying to build a hard monetary asset that can be traded by enemies despite an appetite for war. And this is actually relevant in today's macro environment where we see dollars being seized by different nation states. Bitcoin is trying to replicate and build a harder, more digital form version akin to gold. And so Bitcoin's 10-minute block times and Bitcoin's proof of work are more bound to laws of physics and take in the account of laws like the speed of light, as opposed to Visa's transaction throughput. Bitcoin is bringing a digital instrument and holding it accountable to the laws of physics. And it's allowing a physical digital rock to exist forever despite market conditions. And then once you have this thing that will never go down, that's accessible to everyone, that has predictable issuance, a fixed supply, and is bound to the realities of proof of work so that it has a distributed level of consensus and trust, then you can build payment standards on top of it that make it travel at the speed of light at relatively no cost. So let me be clear. The Lightning Network is not a blockchain. And that is why it will be the superior payments network to transport value digitally. Blockchains are built to build distributed, trustless, digital instruments. They are not optimized for speed and cost. You have to build these protocols in layers. And so everything Sam said, from proof of work to proof of stake to the speed of payments, is factually incorrect. And the last thing I'll say is it is extremely dangerous that there are people that are engineering themselves to be experts by spending a lot of time and money to be treated as an expert, and then can be so factually incorrect. It is extremely dangerous. They are either acting maliciously or they are severely incompetent, but both carry the severe risk of disinformation that is tremendously dangerous, and human resource costs are extremely high with attitude and behavior like that. So that's what I got to say about that. It's just plain speak wrong.
So there are two follow-ups I have on that. So he specifically did point out your gold analogy, and he said that it would be ridiculous to go to a physical store and pay with, physical gold bars. And not only did he say that, but he added on it would be bad for the environment to go and pay in gold in 2022. What is your response to that, given the fact that you mentioned that you view Bitcoin as a form of digital gold?
Yeah, so let's look at the history of money for a second. The reason gold was valuable is its ability to travel through time. It's money's ability to travel through time. I could put a gold bar under my mattress and it didn't matter the rate of inflation that the United States was under, who was at war, whether real estate in Miami was bearish or bullish. Gold carried a sufficient amount of value due to its stock to flow ratio, due to its scarcity, due to its relative hardness. That's the important part. And then fiat currency, fiat notes were traditionally introduced to enhance its ability to travel through space, to make sure that that gold wasn't exchanged for candy at a candy store. And we had gold-backed notes. And together, it created a monetary environment where you could transmit value across space and time, okay?
Yeah.
Now, Bitcoin in its initial form is optimized around the time. I can, for the first time, digitally move $1 million from here to the year 2140. That is a remarkable accomplishment. And it uses proof of work, 10-minute block times, distributed consensus, a distributed network, a fixed supply, a known issuance policy to achieve that. And then things like the Lightning Network can be layered on top of it to enhance its ability to travel through space. And so this is known. It's been relatively known throughout the industry for the last decade. And so comments like spending Bitcoin is akin to spending a gold bar make no sense. Bitcoin encompasses and embodies the ability to travel money through both space and time in the most miraculous, inclusive, open, accessible, innovative way we've ever seen in human history. And so dissuading people from using this innovation is extremely disingenuous and extremely against what humans are about and moving our species forward. I'm so violently against that behavior. And I really hope Sam just has no idea what he's talking about, as opposed to what I think would be a malicious act.
Well, he specifically pointed out the proof of stake versus proof of work. He is not a fan of proof of work, and he believes that it's environmentally costly and it's, something that just will not lead to efficient transactions. Can you respond to why you believe proof of work is necessary?
Yeah. Well, and then listen, Sam, I'm happy to, off the record, hop on the phone and have a conversation. I'm sure you're a great guy. But who Sam is trying to appease for regulation also said the same thing in the CFTC today. And so I have a feeling why Sam feels the way he feels. I have a feeling it's with commercial interest. Listen, again, a blockchain is a distributed ledger. Its point is to allow trustless trade and consensus for a digital instrument to live forever and exist for everyone. It is not optimizing for speed. It is not optimizing for cost. And then once you have the ability to have a digital instrument live forever, that level infrastructure, you can build layers on top of it to do whatever you want it to do, like travel through space instantly and for free. Go from here to Europe instantly and for free. Go from me to Chipotle instantly and for free. That is the beauty of it. So proof of stake, if it's optimizing for transaction throughput, arguably should not be using a blockchain. I think an asset like Solana should register as the security that it is, and the party that has an outsized influence on its performance and its roadmap should register with the SEC, let everyone know who holds the asset, how it's issued, and how it will be performant. They should use a database, and they should compete with other payment networks like Visa, in my opinion. It doesn't make any sense at all. The only reason to use a blockchain is that you're regulatory less accountable than something like a bank or Visa or the Federal Reserve. It's a regulatory arbitrage. A blockchain does not solve the speed and the cost in which an instrument can travel. A blockchain solves relative consensus between trustless parties. It is a misconception, and it is proof of stake solves absolutely nothing.
So do you mind talking about the environmental concerns that many, levy against proof of work? Is that something that you think is a necessary evil in order to build this world where you see, money being able to be stored from 2022 to 2142?
Yeah. So listen, first of all, using energy is not inherently a bad thing. Using energy is part of human life. Okay. Also, I have many thoughts. Firstly, washing machines use more energy than Bitcoin. Okay. So for those that are seriously considering shutting Bitcoin off or switching to a different consensus protocol because of its energy usage, should firstly start hang drying their clothes and not using washing machines. The other beautiful thing about Bitcoin is Bitcoin can use any abundant energy wherever in the world. It actually incentivizes the use of clean energy and abundant excess energy, right? Bitcoin energy usage could be used from a waterfall, for example, that is so rural and not here in Chicago. Do you know where I can't wash my clothes? In a waterfall. If I wanted to have cheaper energy to wash my clothes, watch Netflix, and turn on the lights, I could move inside of a waterfall. Well, guess what? I don't want to live in a waterfall. Bitcoin is so beautiful in its ability to take excess energy and turn it into a monetary instrument that it's actually not competing directly with my washing machine. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's stabilizing the energy grid. And the last thing I will say is that creating money has to have a cost. Any monetary instrument's goal is to create a monetary premium. If creating money were free, then there would be a lot of it. It would be hyperinflated. It would turn political, and it would not derive value from its scarcity and its predictability and its hardness. So money has to have a cost. It has to have a commodity-like cost, unless it is a fiat-based money that is political, issued by a nation state. And so for all of those reasons, the fact that Bitcoin uses energy, its ability to improve on the energy grid and not compete directly with consumer energy like me washing this hoodie, right? And that it has an implied cost to create is why it is the magical internet money that it is. And the energy concerns are nothing but a misunderstanding at best. And again, malicious information at worst. And I'm not going to speculate on which it is, but I'll set the record straight. It's just a non-concern.
So I think the issue that maybe not someone like Sam Bankman-Fried may have, but someone who's a little bit more removed from all of crypto and is skeptical about Bitcoin and everything related to blockchain, is that there is this huge energy cost and it doesn't feel as though anything tangible is being created by it. I know that there's people using Bitcoin as a payment in, El Salvador, and you can use it to tip people on Twitter, but they don't feel as though it's like, it's not like a washing machine where it cleans your clothes. It's this, theoretical thing that they feel as though has helped only a small group of people get rich.
Bitcoin is the most inclusive, accessible, and hardest form of money of all time. Let me put it to you this way. When I'm referencing Bitcoin's hardness, what do I mean by that? How hard is it to create a dollar? You tell me.
With paper or with digitally? Digitally, yeah, very little. It's
very easy. What about creating a new penthouse in New York City? Is that harder than creating a dollar?
It is significantly harder.
Significantly harder, but is it impossible?
What do you mean?
Is there never going to be another penthouse again?
No.
No, it's possible. Okay. Yeah. How hard is it to create a Bitcoin that exceeds the 21 million cap?
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Okay. Yeah. And so Bitcoin, therefore, is the hardest money to ever exist in the history of the universe. Okay. And that is so you're telling me that that's a waste of energy? An ability to create an instrument accessible to everyone in the world, whether you're an oppressive regime, whether you're opposed by government, whether you're sanctioned, whether you're in war, whether you're living through a reasonably inflated time in the Western world of the United States and you need something to hold besides dollars. That is a waste of energy. According to who and what? I mean, Bitcoin has saved lives, improved on technology, pushed the world forward, the notion that is energy wasted makes absolutely no sense. Bitcoin is arguably one of the more forward human rights and activist tools of all time. It is truly democratizing access to a truly fair financial world. And in my opinion, that's a way better use of energy than washing clothes. If I had to pick through a truly fair, fairly distributed, known monetary policy and evenly accessible monetary network to everyone on the planet, I will wash my clothes with my hands instead of sacrifice that. And the human being that's going to look me in the eye and tell me otherwise, I got a real problem with that person. I just don't think those people exist. Again, I think this is largely misunderstandings. At least I hope so. Because if not, it's an attack. And then we got to put them up.
Well, I just think that there's a disconnect. They don't see that world image. And I think, it's not without reason. When people think of Bitcoin right now, I think they think of people who are like on Twitter saying, oh, I'm going to get a Lamborghini with this or something like that. And it doesn't feel like this utopian, situation where you're describing how it'll help like refugees get payments or people not lose their life savings. The more positive aspects of Bitcoin don't feel like they're present in our society, but the more negative ones are kind of in your face.
Yeah. Well, let me also say this. Low stock to flow assets like oil are traditionally not used to save because they're not very hard. Their stock to flow is very low, tremendously low, and they're used for their utility, right? Assets like gold with much better stock to flow are used to store wealth because of their hardness, and their utility in proportion and ratio is practically non-existent. And then you have assets that are somewhere in the middle, like silver. Okay. So the fact that Bitcoin has accomplished a hardness never before seen in our species history, it has set a record for hardness, infinite stock to flow, the only asset that has a guaranteed scarce supply in the history of the universe. And then you relook at a comment made by someone like Sam and say, we should have changed the number 10 minute to 1. No, of course not. This is engineering akin to like nuclear warfare. This is as simple, no mistakes, trustless, known solutions. Proof of stake has never worked ever. No one knows if it's a viable solution or not. And so we're optimizing on creating the hardest asset that's as accessible to everyone in the planet as ever humanly seen before. And then we can take this thing that we know is going to exist forever. It's never going to go down like a Solana. It's never going to be a security. It's never going to be centralized. And then We could build Lightning and make it move at the speed of light at relatively no cost and have it be the best payment network in the world at transporting value from point A to point B. And that is if people misunderstand that, hopefully I'm clarifying it. That is where we are today, and why it doesn't mean that something like a Solana doesn't make sense. Listen, there's a lot of value in gold. There's a lot of value in Tesla stock. I see Solana like a security that has a team that optimizes and drives value towards it, that has a heavy influence particular to the asset, and they should register with the SEC, and people should be able to buy Solana as a security token. And I see Bitcoin as this digital rock that's property, that is the hardest asset of all time, that's the best at transporting value from A to B, and the best payments network humanly possible in the Lightning Network. Does that make sense?
And I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about the Lightning Network. So here's another thing that people, have commented about. Why use Bitcoin? Why use Satoshis when, it's, volatile and the prices can change? And, I remember not that long ago, a mortgage company had to stop accepting Bitcoin because of how volatile it was. People are now saying, why don't they just create like a USDC coin, or why don't you use stable coins instead of using, Bitcoin's Lightning Network and using Satoshis to pay for, Twitter tips or for food or to buy, Chipotle, something like that?
Yeah, so it's a fantastic question. And my answer, I'm not advocating for the use of Bitcoin and to take on its volatility in that way. What I'm advocating for is using the Lightning Network to transport value. At the end of the day, what is a payments network? A payments network job is to transport the value from point A to point B. Take Visa, for example. When you swipe your card at Chipotle, is Visa actually transporting the dollars in real time? No, of course not, because dollars aren't digital. They're actually working with all the related parties to eventually 15 days later settle your money. Now, the problem with payment networks as we know them today is they're building digital payment networks for non-digital assets. How do you digitally move a dollar? How do you digitally move a Vincent van Gogh painting? How do you digitally move a bar of gold or a coin of silver? You can't, okay? What I'm saying is that all of a sudden we do now have a digital instrument. It's a digital instrument that will exist forever, that will exist no matter the macro environment, no matter the oppressive regime, no matter the inflation rate. It is universally known and valued no matter where you are, and it can travel and move at the speed of light. And so all I'm saying is that this is the best network humanly known to transport value from point A to point B. So what could happen is you can walk into a Chipotle now, and an app could have $10 of yours on the application. When you go to buy your burrito, it will take the $10 out of the app, turn it to Bitcoin, zip that Bitcoin to Chipotle, and turn the Bitcoin back into dollars, for example, if that were the experience Chipotle wanted. That way, nobody experiences volatility. No one has to custody the asset. Nobody is interfacing with Bitcoin. Particularly, Bitcoin is just used as a universal vehicle to transmit value at the speed of light, which is something humanity has longed for. And for that reason is what I'm advocating for. Now, if someone wanted to use Bitcoin, if someone wanted to move dollars over the Lightning Network, which is what my company does, if someone wanted to move Starbucks points over the Lightning Network, they absolutely can, because the standard is open and it's inclusive for everyone to do whatever they'd like. But I think what Lightning is particularly good at is transmitting value universally at the speed of light. And that is what I'm advocating for, not taking on volatility, not having to custody it, not dealing with any of the cryptography. It's taking advantage of a digital instrument that can move at the speed of light.
So why not a stable coin? Why Bitcoin? Why are you using Bitcoin?
Well, I think so. Firstly, one of our products at Strike, we allow you to move stable coins over the Lightning Network. And it's very popular. It was the product we launched in El Salvador. And so I don't think a stable coin is inherently a bad thing. I think a consumer and an acquirer, a merchant, should be able to interface with an open payment network like Lightning in whichever assets that they want. People could build those experiences. The problem with the stablecoin, why Bitcoin will be superior, is because a stablecoin is inherently backed by paper dollars, and it does not have the properties that allow it to move at the speed of light. In order to have the properties that Bitcoin has, it has to be, again, this universal digital trustless instrument that lives within its own monetary policy, that its own issuance, its scarce supply, sufficient demand, and it will live forever. Okay. And then you can interface other assets on top of it when transporting value. But a stablecoin inherently does not have those properties unless, I know Lightning Labs is working on minting assets on top of the Lightning Network, so on and so forth. But I think the true problem was solved is that you can move value digitally at the speed of light anywhere in the world from any point A to any point B. And then building experiences where moving dollars, moving euros, moving Starbucks points, moving game points, those are all just entrepreneurial incentives for people to create amazing experiences and amazing businesses. This is very similar to the internet. And so that's the way I look at it. And a lot of these other proof of stake or all the other stuff, it's really just noise and a large misconception, and they don't solve any tangible real world problems.
So you're saying that a proof of stake network could not solve that problem the way the proof of work network that Bitcoin has is?
No, proof of stake has highly centralized incentives. The problem with proof of stake is that BlackRock can then purchase a particular stake within a network and then have outsized control on the ordering of transactions or what transactions are allowed to go through, for example, whereas a Bitcoin miner does not. Whether I join the Bitcoin network today or I join the Bitcoin network as the second network participant after Satoshi, I have the same chance and the same right to solve the difficulty and mine the next block. And that is extremely, 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 extremely important. Yeah. And so a proof of stake network will likely be a security, will have centralized tendencies, and it will not be as accessible to everyone in the planet. It will not be as inclusive. It will not be as iterative. And for those reasons, it will not suit the world for the global way to transmit value digitally. And so, listen, is there room for them? I don't know. The market will decide. They should probably register with the SEC and they should probably be a securities token. They should do all of these things. And maybe you'll look at them like a Tesla stock or like an Apple stock or like an Amazon stock. But the world's value transmitter and the way to store money across time and transmit money across space is very obviously Bitcoin. And there's no competitor, in my opinion, as of now.
Should it be considered under the umbrella of crypto, a proof of stake network, or is that just like so far removed from like the ideals of Satoshi that it's not even, it's like fake crypto basically?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the answer to this question, I don't think is, I've been around a decent amount of time in the space where crypto wasn't a thing. Blockchain wasn't an industry. Blockchain was two words. And it was the result of running the Bitcoin software. It was the ledger of blocks that were appended. And so I don't know what crypto means, and nor do I think it matters. I think what matters is ensuring that Bitcoin holds true to the properties that make it valuable in the first place, and then allowing people to build things like the Lightning Network and Strike on top of it, which solve really, really long tried and true problems for the world. And so I don't know if proof of stake wants to be a crypto or a security, or they want to be a fintech. It's up to them, and it's really not my concern.
Well, kind of, looping on that, venture capital funding has increased dramatically for the idea of crypto projects, but only 2% of funding has gone towards Bitcoin-centric projects. What do you think about this pivot by, the Silicon Valley VCs and people who are investors viewing Bitcoin as being an outdated platform?
Yeah, well, I feel bad. I feel like I'm just harshly criticizing a lot of, but I think it's a lot of nonsense. I don't think that metric that you just quoted is directly reflective of where the innovation is. What I've always traditionally called altcoins or alternative cryptocurrencies, or however you'd like to describe them, as arbitrage is on the trend. What do I mean by that? I think they're an arbitrage in two ways. One, it's an informational arbitrage in that the Federal Reserve and central banks at large have perverted risk tolerance across all assets. Nobody knows the price of anything. All everyone knows is it's not necessarily safe to save in dollars or denominated fiat currency anymore, and you have to hold other things. And there's a rush to get out and not a lot of education on how to get in and what to get into. And then also, regulatory bodies have not properly regulated the industry and deemed what's a security, how to protect the retail investor, and what to disclose to people so that they have the sufficient information to make responsible investments. And so the combination of that is a informational arbitrage and an regulatory arbitrage. And so if I'm a venture capitalist, it is a primed opportunity to create a digital token instrument like Luna, market it to the world with 20% APY, and consumers who are being rushed out of fiat currency due to central banks, due to the inflation, due to the macro environment, and don't know what to get into, see an Instagram ad, buy this thing. And because the SEC has not properly regulated it and provided retail consumers with the correct disclosures of how it works, who's involved, how it's distributed, and how it drives value back to the token holders, well, there you have an arbitrage opportunity. And I call it particularly an arbitrage opportunity because it doesn't make any logical sense. It only makes sense given the market structure that exists today. And that's what an arbitrage trade is. An arbitrage trade is I could buy a banana to my left for $1 and sell it to my right for $10. I can create a securities token for free without getting in trouble, registering with the SEC and having to educate people in a morally responsible way. And then I can sell something like Luna up to the tail of $60 billion in market cap. But as markets get efficient, then that won't be logical anymore. As the banana to my left is $10 and the banana to my right is $10, then I can't do that anymore. And so I see these very, very short-lived and not actual innovation, but it's no wonder capital's flowing into it because bananas to my left are $1 and bananas to my right are 10. It's free money.
So I guess it seems as though you're calling for more regulation of crypto overall. Is that an accurate statement or?
So I think personally, I think it would be helpful. I don't think it's necessary. I think that as this industry develops, it's becoming very apparent and clear that Bitcoin, as of now, not in a religious way, just doesn't have any clear competition as a hard asset rivaling something like gold and that could travel across space like the Lightning Network. It just does not have any relevant competition. And for that reason, I don't think it's necessary for a regulatory body to distinct Bitcoin versus anything else. Now, as a human being, as Jack Mallers, I would love to see regulation because I think people are getting slaughtered out there. I think Luna holders, I mean, we're seeing suicidal attempts. I mean, it's disheartening for someone who is familiar enough with the industry to look at Luna and know that it's not going to last and know that it's going to crash and then watch it live out in real time. It's a really frightening thing to see. And I would like to think that these things are both a security by law and also morally. It is a morally violating thing to do. And I think in theory, this is why regulation exists. And so I personally think it would do a lot to instill confidence within the industry. But exclusion of my personal preference, do I think it's necessary and required or else Bitcoin is doomed to fail? No, absolutely not.
Well, yeah. So I guess would you say proof of stake networks should be regulated by, the SEC? And, that's something Gary Gensler just mentioned that he wants to regulate stablecoins. Is this something, as a person you would like to see happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about what exactly would be a security in theory. What is the securities law? Security is an asset that is issued by a particular body, and it's this body that has an outsized control on its direction and its performance, and they can do things to the security or to the asset or to the token that other individuals don't have privilege to do. And then you have to disclose that and who owns it and how it's issued, how you're going to influence it, so that everyone else has an understanding of how it works. And so I think if there are assets that have a particular body that has an outsized influence, outsized control, a pre-mine, it's not fairly evenly distributed, then yeah, of course, I mean, this is how society has traditionally worked. And so I in the nuance of, I've heard this proof of stake algorithm and this staking the Shubadoo coin, barbecue chicken coin. I don't know. It's not worth my time to get into all that stuff. I just think that these things deserve to be regulated so that people are protected.
Yeah. So kind of on that last topic of conversation, Jack Dorsey, who's a fan of yours, publicly called out Andreessen Horowitz and venture capitalists for what, this thing that seems to be like George Orwell's idea of newspeak Web3. And it seems as though there's a crypto civil war between Bitcoin and the other blockchains. Is that an accurate sentiment amongst the people who are in the Bitcoin space? They use the phrase Bitcoin maxis. Is this a civil war that's going on, or is this just just beef over random, preferences?
I have a few thoughts. Firstly, I don't want to speak for Jack, but I think Jack's main issue is the waste of human capital. I think Jack and I share in the belief that Bitcoin is arguably the greatest tool humanity has come across in empowering our species. And certainly, in my opinion, the greatest tool that will come across in my lifetime. And the fact that we have so many resources that are misaligned with potential misinformation or misguided with malicious intent that are wasting money, energy, and just general human resources on something that isn't actually additive to the mission is what is so painful to watch. And then on top of that, the other point that I think is very harmful is that the creating a security is not inherently bad. Jack Dorsey created a security. It's called Square Stock. And he's very public about it. He registered with the SEC. He lets everyone know who holds it, their direction. He has quarterly meetings and quarterly reports. They just held an investor call to let everyone know the direction of the security. So they're not inherently bad. Where they become morally wrong is when they have the properties of a security and they market themselves otherwise. And that is the other problem that I think, don't want to speak for Jack, but people like Jack and myself have, is that it's okay to create a security, to have a more centered direction and influence on an asset, not be central, be relatively centralized and have relatively central control, pre-mine a thing. That's totally fine. Square stock was pre-mined. Strike stock was pre-mined. I owned 100% of it when I started the company. That's not a problem. But I don't pretend that Strike stock is a decentralized asset that is can be trustless and has properties akin to Bitcoin. Strike stock and Bitcoin are very different. And I think that's where the moral line is crossed. And so I wouldn't call it a civil war. It's just how do you morally respond to that? Is that, do you just let it go and let people get tricked? Or do you be vocal about it and voice your concerns and what you think is a improperly marketed asset and mission that is utilizing Bitcoin's properties to draw attention and artificial demand to something that you've created that maybe doesn't have the same properties?
Yeah, well, kind of on that, topic of conversation, one of the big theses a lot of people have for why, Bitcoin and crypto will succeed is a lot of the smartest people who are, in their 20s are leaving their stable jobs to work in crypto. Do you think that that's something that you're seeing, as someone who's a young programmer who's, clearly talented in what he does? Are you seeing more people who are like you, willing to forego free lunches at Google and stuff like that in order to go and work in crypto because, either political ideas that this is going to, change the world as we know it, or because, it's just more interesting than working for Facebook or working for Google, something like that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that, and of all ages, by the way. I think that it really speaks to the mission that Bitcoin has and what it embodies and represents to our species. I think I've said this before. I think as a human being, you inherently want two things by being alive. You want to be part of something bigger than yourself. That is not living and dying alone, building relationships. And then the other is working on something that will last longer than you will. And that's somewhat of leaving a legacy and a footprint on the fact that the universe will carry on much longer than you will. And Bitcoin embodies both of those. And it's very difficult to find a project that embodies those properties quite like Bitcoin. And so we've seen personally at Strike, not only are people leaving these jobs to come work at a company like Strike, but they're staying. Bitcoin's network effects are not only the price, but also the quality of employees, and our turnover is frankly zero, is because no one's deathly passionate about the PayPal network. Yeah. There are people that are deathly passionate about the Bitcoin network because it means more than a salary to them. And I think personally, that is the true epitome of living a high quality of life, is being interconnected with our species and building a relationship that exceeds just your own presence. And then working on something like Bitcoin that will live longer than you will, that will outlive yourself. And it's probably, from just a human conscious standpoint, the most noble project to work on and contribute to and to help others through.
Well, kind of on that line of thinking, at the Bitcoin 2022 conference, you mentioned that you criticized boomer money, right? And you just mentioned that people from all different backgrounds are going into crypto, but on the whole, it is a younger person thing. This is something that, when you talk to the average, I guess, boomer, they'll say, oh, it's my kid or my grandson who's obsessed with crypto. But do you think crypto needs boomer allies in order to get to the top of that S curve? Or is this something like Steve Jobs said about the iPhone, that it doesn't matter if people don't understand how it works, or old people don't understand how it works, because by the time, we get to the top of the S curve, those people will be dead. Is that the same with Bitcoin?
Well, I think in part, Steve is correct. But I actually don't think Bitcoin needs to embody the exact quote that Steve displayed. At the Bitcoin conference, my boomer jokes, as I would call them, We're more criticizing old technology, not old people.
Yeah.
I wanted to highlight and comically allude towards the fact that the user story that checks me out at Chipotle today is the same user story that checked my grandfather out at the corner store in 1949. And that's what I wanted to allude to with comedy and with a relative attitude. But more so, I mean, inclusion is at the nucleus of this movement. Bitcoin is for everyone, old, young, this way, that way, on the upside of the world, downside of the world. Bitcoin holds no bias. It knows no context outside of the system itself. For example, Satoshi Nakamoto. Maybe I was criticizing him, her, or they. Are they a boomer? I don't know. And that's the point. It shouldn't matter where you went to school, how old you are. It is an inclusive asset. And that is the nucleus of the mission, in my opinion, at least a part of it. So I was not criticizing any people in particular. I think my goal was the comedic environment would be more relatable and humanizable as the message to be conveyed. But I was more critical of old technology and just alluding to the fact that a lot of the people that did create the bank consortiums that are now card networks aren't alive anymore. And they weren't alive to see a digital instrument that could travel at the speed of light and probably do it a lot better.
Do you think they would be adopters of Bitcoin?
I think if Bitcoin existed in 1949, we would not have the Visa that we know today. I think a digital instrument that could travel at the speed of light does a much better job in transmitting value from point A to point B than some 2 to 15 day long settlement, high intensive cost system like Western Union or Visa. I think they built a system for the assets that were there, which were paper dollars. And today we have superior, better assets, and we should make use of them.
Yeah, well, two more subjects of conversation would love to talk to you about. El Salvador. So, El Salvador is probably one of the crowning achievements of Strike. Do you mind talking about how you were able to get that done? And what is the roadmap forward, given the fact that, this happened a year ago, and so far only one other country has adopted Bitcoin as, a legal form of currency?
Yeah, I'd like to firstly be clear that we have no commercial relationship with the government of El Salvador, nor any other government. We look at ourselves as builders on top of an open network. And one of our missions is to make that network as accessible and usable as possible. And we encourage more participation on top of it. So my role in El Salvador was strictly as a Bitcoiner, and I was far, far from alone. Folks like Bitcoin Beach, like the Bitcoin Beach wallet, the Salvadoran government themselves, I played a very particular and small role in being a Bitcoiner and making this tool more accessible and usable to a party that had keen interest in it adding value to their life and their country. And so I think it was a huge milestone for Bitcoin, the asset. And I think it is potentially misleading to think that because a year later, only one other country has adopted it means anything other than things take time. Building technology, building new experiences, and utilizing an asset like Bitcoin for a nation state, both in inclusive payments network and as a hard money reserve, takes a lot of time. And I think the better measurement is, where are we in 10 years? And so I think we're off to a great start, in my opinion, and I'm tremendously proud of what El Salvador has done. And I'm encouraged and inspired by the way that they've took on Bitcoin as something that could be useful for their citizens and their country.
In 10 years, how many countries do you think will be orange pilled?
Hopefully all of them. But again, I'm not entirely positive that it's useful to speculate. Yeah. I think that there's potential fallacy within the industry that, when are we going to be hyper Bitcoinized? When is the dollar going to die? And the way I practically live my life personally is that today, when I woke up this morning, there are very tangible steps to improve the world as we know it now, with the tools that we are blessed with in Bitcoin. And so I think having a more practical to-do list and just knocking them out one by one is how I live my life. So 10 years from now, a lot can change, and it's not necessarily worth all my time to speculate on that. 10 days from now, a lot can change, and I know I can influence that. And so that's kind of how I spend my time.
Yeah. So kind of talking a little bit more about Strike, you guys help with a lot of getting rid of some of the complexities of using the Lightning Network. Can you talk about specifically how Strike helps with that?
Yeah. So one of the key innovations with Strike is we allow you to make a Lightning Network payment with dollars and receive a Lightning Network payment as dollars. So, for example, you can go to Starbucks and you can check out over Lightning with your US dollars. You may have never heard of Bitcoin before. You don't care what the price is. You don't know how volatile it's been. You don't have to have a hardware wallet. You could have a Chase account with $100 in it and use the Lightning Network to check out at Starbucks with that $100. And then on the receiving end, being able to receive a Lightning payment as dollars enables a company like Walmart or like Amazon potentially to accept Lightning payments as dollars. And so they don't have to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They don't have to worry about the volatility. They don't have to worry about the regulation and the tax consequences and the accounting complexity. It comes in as dollars just like a traditional Visa payment would, just a lot cheaper and a lot faster. And so our innovation is allowing you to interface with what we believe to be the superior payments network and escrowing value in the entire planet and in the history of our species, and allowing you to use it with the dollars that you're accustomed to spending and receiving.
So when you pitch companies, is it like if you pitch an Amazon, that exact pitch, do you find them to be more or less receptive than if you pitch a smaller, company that's a little bit more like tech friendly? Like who are the people who are, receptive to Strike?
Everyone. I think like the reality, let me pitch you a reality. Walmart uses the Strike API to accept payments, and we charge them 10 basis points compared to Visa charging them 300 basis points. They get access to the capital after payment that very second versus 15 to 30 days later. They're a fan of that.
Yeah.
We're making money, and our consumers and the consumers around the world are having a better experience and more rewards. So everyone wins. So I've never heard of anyone understand what Strike does and be like, I don't want a better world. I don't want a more democratized payment system that's more inclusive and more innovative and that's cheaper and that's faster. So everyone has an appetite for the revolution that is to come. I think there's just a very different appetite. So a smaller merchant maybe has more wiggle room and more ambition to get involved right away. Whereas in a conversation with some of these larger public companies, S&P 500 merchants, there's just a lot more complexity involved in onboarding them. There are specific accounting practices that they need to adhere by when they report their finances, which is one of the reasons we auto settle in dollars for particular merchants, is that they quite literally cannot accept Bitcoin on the balance sheet just yet. They also need certain compliance and regulatory oversight. They have a lot of requests and demands, and then they also want to make sure that the market is as of size where it'll be worthwhile for their business, which is why we allow consumers on the issuing side to spend over dollars. So I think everyone has an appetite for it because it's a better world for quite literally everybody. And there's just a different pace and ambition and timing and order of operations and priority depending on the size of the merchant and their particular stance.
So, final question. Let's say you're watching this and you're someone who wants to be useful in this space. How do you go about doing that? How do you avoid getting involved with the Lunas? How do you start, being actually useful if you watch this and you're orange pilled from, Jack Mallers, comeback against Sam Bankman-Fried, and he wants to be, he or she or they want to be someone who participates in the system in a positive way. How do they go about doing that?
Well, I would argue that there should, in theory, be no mistakes. Don't invest more that you can lose. Be perpetually curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The journey to arriving to like a true purpose and contribution in this world, and then in particular in this industry, is very unique to oneself. And you should allow yourself to go upon that journey. I personally would stick to Bitcoin. I personally would invest very little in the beginning and allow yourself to experience and to learn, and then allow your curiosity to drive you forward, whether you want to be an engineer, whether you want to work in customer support, whether you want to found your own company. I mean, it's all collectively additive. And it's one of the beautiful properties of something like Bitcoin is it's open and everyone's work gets to be shared within the work of the world. And so that we're all on this relative same team to build what we believe to be a more reflective, fair world for everybody. And so that would be my advice. And if you do get involved with the Luna, that's not necessarily a mistake. It would be a mistake if you put your life savings in something that went to zero. But I would argue that that mistake is not required for you to learn. So I would be careful, be honest with yourself, and be perpetually curious. And that Bitcoin is open and inclusive to everybody, and there's a spot for everybody.
Well, I guess just final question. How did Jack Mallers get orange pilled?
My father. So my parents are watching this. I have a cheat code, A, B, right trigger, left joystick. I have a hack and that my dad got into Bitcoin before me, and he highly encouraged me to spend my young adult years on it. And here I am.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for your time. And take care.
Likewise.